Spring is the time to prune your hydrangea, but if you get it wrong, then you could have a plant that won't flower all summer long. So there's a right way and a wrong way to prune your plant. Let me show you the right way. So why is spring the best time to prune your hydrangea? Now this applies to any hydrangea that you have, whether it be a beautiful Annabelle hydrangea with the white flowers, or a mophead hydrangea like this one I've got here with pink flowers or sometimes blue flowers. But essentially, the spent flowers, they protect the stems over winter, protect it from frost damage. If you were to cut these off at the beginning of winter, then this stem you just cut off will have no protection at the tip from frost damage, and it tends to affect the stem during winter, and then come spring you have a plant that's not really looking its best. So it's always a fantastic idea to do it in spring, never at the beginning of winter. Now the confusing thing about hydrangeas is whether they flower on old wood or new wood. So in the case of the mophead hydrangea, which I've got here, these flower on old wood. So that essentially means that we should only do a light pruning, and that is basically just to take off the flowers, like so. I'll go into more detail in a sec. But for hydrangeas that flower on new wood, then that means you can do a bit of a heavier prune. You can get in there and prune much further to the base of the plant. Because a hydrangea that flowers on new wood, it tends to grow very rapidly. So you'll get long stems, it'll grow really tall for a good few weeks, and then eventually the flowers will develop and you'll have quite a large plant in your hand. So that's why you tend to need to cut them back near the base of the plant, otherwise they get too leggy if you don't prune them back enough year after year. Whereas with a hydrangea like the mophead that flowers on old wood, if you were to cut it right back, then you're basically cutting off that year's flowers. It's not going to be able to flower. And this is a mistake I've done with this plant before. So you'll see that I've got stems where I've cut back quite close to the base of the plant, and that year I didn't get any flowers on my hydrangea. So it's always a good idea to kind of find out how your hydrangea flowers. But don't worry too much about it. Basically, if you're not sure whether it flowers on new or old wood, then just do a very light pruning, which I'm going to show you for this plant, and then see how it grows. It's not really going to matter for that year, and then the following year you'll know how to prune your hydrangea. So you'll know when it's time to prune your hydrangea because you'll see the buds starting to emerge lower down on the stem, just underneath where the flower head is. And this is where we need to cut. Dead simple with a hydrangea that flowers on old wood, like a mophead, such as this. All you need to do is to locate the flower at the top and then follow it down to the next set of buds that are starting to emerge. You just cut above that. You're just taking off the flowers, basically. That's all we're doing for this hydrangea. And then what's going to happen is these two new buds, or more on the stem lower down, are going to develop, they're going to grow on, and then they're going to flower. So all we're going to do is just go through, again, this is the top of the plant where the flower head is, the old flower head from last year. We're going to follow it down and we're going to cut just above those nodes that are starting to open up. So you want to give a bit of room for them to grow on, maybe like 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch or so, because there will be a bit of dieback on the bit that you cut off, so you don't want that to affect the buds that are opening. So you can go through, some of them, they won't be quite as developed, they'll still be in the infancy stage, they won't be quite as green as the ones I've cut off already. But again, you just go back to the first set of buds that are starting to emerge and just cut them off. So I'm going to go through now and cut off all these heads, and then I'll show you the next stage. So there you go. So as you can see, I've not pruned off a great deal. I'm basically only just deadheading it. But if your hydrangea is looking a little bit leggy, then don't worry too much about pruning it further back. If you prune it a bit further back, it just means you're going to get less flowers that year, but it will recover. The following year, you probably have a more compact plant and not a leggy one. So do feel free to prune back if you want to, a bit further than this. So we pruned off all the flower heads, so it's looking much neater now. So now we need to kind of prune for any dead or diseased stems. I'm just picking off some old leaves that I've kind of stuck to this stem here. I'm just getting rid of that, just tidying it up a little bit. So is there any dead or diseased stems that need cutting off? So these brown ones here, I think could do with cutting back a little bit more. So I don't think they're going to be the healthiest for the plant. Anything that's looking kind of withered and a bit too brown. So this one I'm not too keen on, so I'm going to cut that all the way back. So that's basically all brown. So I don't think they're going to get much flowers out of that. So I'm just going to go through and tidy up these stems a bit more. So that one, for example, is completely withered away. That's a completely dry, more or less dead bit of stem, so I've cut that off entirely. Okay, so I think I've cut off most of the dead and diseased stems. Now you want to kind of assess the plant and see if there's any stems that are kind of crossing over or getting in the way. So a hydrangea looks best when it's kind of opened out a little bit, where the majority of the stems are kind of growing away from the centre. So if there's any stems that are kind of crossing in the middle, you just want to cut those out. This one doesn't look too bad at the moment. And the other advantage of doing that, by creating some room in the middle of the plant, you're allowing light and airflow to get into the middle. You have a much healthier plant. So let's have a look. There's this one down here that's right in the middle. Don't like the look of that so much. That one looks like it's going to start to cross over. I'm going to cut that off. That one's crossing with that stem, so I'm going to cut that out. So this one has got some nice buds on it, but it's growing from the middle of the base and it's quite tall and it's growing cutting right through the centre of the plant. So I'm actually going to cut that back entirely. It's looking a little bit leggy. So I might be able to propagate that actually. They do propagate quite nicely from hardwood cuttings. There's a dead stem there I'm going to cut off. Okay, so this is not looking too bad now. It doesn't look like there's too many stems that are going to start crossing into each other once they start growing and flowering. There's a bit more room in the centre. I'm actually going to take that one out just to create more room in the centre. Basically, though, don't worry too much about what to prune and all that kind of stuff, because once the plant starts growing and leafing out, you'll be able to get a better picture of how overcrowded the plant is and whether stems are crossing with each other. So it can be pruned when it's in leaf and it's starting to flower as well, so don't worry too much about it. Okay, so it looks like we've done a good job pruning our hydrangea here. I've got lots of spent flowers that I've cut off all over my lawn. I've got lots of twigs and sticks that I need to clean up. So the next stage is very important. There's a bit of holly in here. I'm just going to get that out. I think that might be growing in the plant, in the pot. Bit of holly, so that's interesting. So the next stage, just got some old mulch here. The next stage to really get this plant going is to top dress. And for that, we're going to use some compost. It's always a great idea, every year, once you finish pruning your plant, is to go in, especially with potted plants, is to go in and just top dress with some fresh compost. That way you're going to increase or add life and vitality to the soil of the plant, and it's going to have a much easier time in flowering exactly how you want. So that's what I'm going to do now. I've got some nice fresh compost here, freshly delivered 2 weeks ago. Nice rich dark colour. So I'm just going to go through and add about a 2-inch layer of fresh compost on the top of the soil. When you're doing this, of course, you don't really want to pile it onto the crown of the plant where the plant is coming out of the soil, because that has a tendency to maybe rot the base of the plant. So you don't want to pile it up, but around the edges is fine. So I think I've done that now, a good couple of inches of compost. So that's going to bring life to the soil. It's going to kind of filter through to the bottom of the pot. It's going to add a lot more life, and this hydrangea is going to be much happier. So that is all there is to it. Very simple. If you'd love to make homemade compost at home, but you have no idea where to start, then make sure you watch this video here.